Over to you, Vijay, because many of us say we're fighting the same fight again and again and again. There was a conversation yesterday, will this fight ever end?
Will this fight ever end? Well, first, Asad, thanks for forcing me to come to Glasgow. When I walk the streets of cities like this, Glasgow was the UK's second most important city. Beautiful buildings, beautiful streets, a gorgeous city. It had Red Clydeside in 1919, the uprising to create a Soviet in Scotland. But it was, crushed, of course. When I see cities like this, I think also about the other side of it. There's a phrase from Walter Benjamin, every monument of civilization is also a monument of barbarism. I think of the famines in Bengal, the jute workers in Bengal sending jute to Dundee through the Glasgow port. I think of human beings from Africa enslaved and brought from Ghana to the New World, and all those prophets getting sucked into cities like London and Glasgow. Between 1765 and 1938, the British Isles stole $45 trillion pounds from India, 45 trillion sterling from India. We never got paid for that. When the British left India, when we threw the British out, our literacy rate was 13%. So much for several hundred years of so-called civilization. Meanwhile, our landscapes were destroyed. Coal was foisted on India. You foisted coal on us. You were the ones that came and made us coal dependent. And then you left, and now you dare to condescend to us. When I listen to Boris Johnson, when I listen to people like Joe Biden, when I listen even more to Emmanuel Macron, all I can think of is how condescending you are. You condescended to us 400 years ago. You condescended to us 300 years ago. You condescended to us 200 years ago. You condescended to us 100 years ago. You're condescending to us today. You only know condescension because for you, colonialism isn't something that happened in the past and we defeated you. It's not that. For you, colonialism is a permanent condition. And that permanent condition happens in two ways. There's the permanent condition of the colonial mentality. You want to lecture us. You want to tell us that we are responsible for all the problems because you'll never accept that you're the one principally to blame. You signed the Rio Formula in 1992 on common and differentiated responsibilities. You like the common part. You like the common part. You like to say we're all in this together and so on. We're not in this together. The United States, 4-5% of the world's population, still uses 25% of the world's resources. You outsource production to China and then you say China is the carbon polluter. China's producing your buckets. China's producing your nuts and bolts. China's producing your phones. Try to produce it in your own countries and see your carbon emissions rise. You love lecturing us because you have a colonial mentality. Then there are colonial structures and institutions. You lend us money, and every time you lend us money, which is our money, every time the International Monetary Fund comes to our societies and they tell us, here's the money we are giving you. No, it's our money. You give us our money back as debt, and then you lecture us about how we should live. It's extraordinary. It's not just a colonial mentality. It's a colonial structures and institutions which reproduce themselves year after year after year. And let me tell you something. The climate justice movement, not clued enough on this. Not clued enough on this. The climate justice movement is a movement that says we're worried about our future. What future? What future? Children in the African continent, in Asia, in Latin America, they don't have a future. They don't have a present. They're not worried about the future. They're worried about their present. Your slogan is, we're worried about the future. What future? That's a middle-class bourgeois Western slogan. You got to be worried about now. 2.7 billion people can't eat now. And you're telling people, reduce your consumption. How does this sound to a child who hasn't eaten in days? You got to clue into this, guys. You got to clue into this. Otherwise, this movement will have no legs in the third world. No legs. Later, I'd like to tell you about the International People's Assembly, a network of 200 political organizations that we're setting up, rooted in the global south. We want to tell you what our issues are, but are you willing to listen?
Welcome back. So in this video, we took a look at this Indian historian who was on a panel discussion, and he spoke extensively about the colonial mentality of the United States of America, the fallacy behind white supremacy in the United States of America. Now, he hinged his point on these two main factors: colonial mentality and then colonial institutions. These are the things he says are holding this white supremacy fallacy together for the white people to think that they are superior over other groups of people. Now, he says that the United States of America, whose population makes up about 4 to 5% of the entire world population, yet it uses about 25% of the world resources. And I think this is mind-blowing. Looking at their population, it is around about 300 million. That is about 4 to 5% of the world population. And they are using 25% of the world resources. That means if you divide the world resources into 4 parts, they are using 1 of the world resources. Now, white supremacy has been a thing over the centuries or over the years. White people are thought of to be superior because they have perpetuated this idea or sold this idea to other people of the world, and it looks like their idea has worked perfectly well for them up until now. But it looks like nowadays a lot of other groups of people are trying to take away this idea of white supremacy because it is some form of a fallacy that is being played on the minds of people from other race. Now, the United States outsources its production to China, and then later on it blames China for carbon pollution. Majority of the things used in the United States are produced by China. Meanwhile, the United States always blames China for carbon pollution. So if they are producing things for your country, definitely they are going to emit carbon, but it looks like they want to play smart and look like the good boy in this case because they have not produce anything, or they do not produce things in large quantity that causes carbon emission or great quantity in carbon emission. Meanwhile, China produces a lot to be sold to the United States, and thereby having this large quantity of carbon pollution or carbon emission. Now, he also stated that white supremacy is also hinged on colonial institutions. Now, they have established institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, which helps to put world economies or countries in check. Now, these financial institutions lend money to countries, and later on, after lending money to these countries, they later on dictate to the countries how these monies should be used, what they need to do, and what they need not to do. He says this is an ideology of white supremacy, and indeed it is an ideology of white supremacy, because if I come to borrow something from you, I would have to determine what I need to use the money for. All you need to care for is that I would be able to pay back your money to you when the time is due. But this is not so. The white supremacists or the white imperialists have put in place guidelines to guide the economies of countries. And this, he says, constitute white supremacy or white imperialism. They are using these institutions, that is the International Monetary Fund, in order to bring this agenda into fruition. Now, always the Western world talks about protecting the world for the future, but he keeps also asking the question, why do you even think about the future whilst the present is not even guaranteed? He says across the globe, there are about 2.7 billion people who find it difficult to feed on daily basis. So why do you ignore such a huge problem and think about what will happen in the future? That is not to say that he does not think about the future, but you need to think about your present conditions now before you think about the future. Always, these white supremacists think about themselves and not the entire world at large. So he's championing the fact that, or he's bringing out the fact that this white supremacy needs to be taken off so that countries could also thrive on their own and help to better the life of the people, the citizens in the country. Let me know what you also think about this in the comment section below. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and your family, and also don't forget to share on other social media platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, and other social media platforms. Also subscribe to the channel. Just look at the subscribe button down here. Click on the subscribe button. Click as well on the notification bell. And I'd like to see you again in my next video.